Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Dr. Foreman, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here with you today. I believe our conversation is going to add a lot of value to everybody watching. Thank you for having me.
I absolutely believe that as well. So I'm excited to learn all about you and the work that you've been up to. But before we get to that, I would like to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
Yes, you know what it was? It was working at a lawyer's office. I wanted to go into law, and so I got a job at a lawyer's office who was dating one of our family members, and so I leveraged that relationship. And so he wasn't responding to my calls, and so I'm a very assertive personality, and so I went to his office. And so as a kid, I got down to his office. When I got down to his office, I cornered him and I said, basically, I want this job. I want to be a lawyer one day. And so you're going to need to give me this job. He said, well, I don't really have. I said, oh, you can give me something. There's something here you need done. And literally, I negotiated my first job offer in the parking lot of of where his law office was. And I started as an office assistant at 12 years old.
Oh my word. What an amazing story. I mean, there's so much packed in there.
Yeah.
So, a variety of questions, right? Networking from the very beginning, knowing what it is that you want. So, I mean, at 12, so has that
Yeah.
always just been a part of who you are, just very dedicated and driven, or?
And it really is. The joke is I came out of my mom's womb with a Bible and a briefcase. So I had this affinity towards spirituality and success and business and leadership and entrepreneurship. I was a very different kid. I was the type of kid where I was drawn to leaders. So while most of my peers were concerned about being friends with one another, I was interested in being friends with the teachers, the administrators, the people with power. It was the leader in me that was drawn to leadership. And I learned not to demonize that difference. And so, interestingly enough, getting that job at 12, that's the same year I started my very first business. And so, I had multiple jobs, right, at 12. I had started my first business. There's a bank in Denver called Young Americans Bank, or I believe now it's Young Americans Education Foundation. And the entire operation is based around this concept that you have financial products for kids 18 and under, of course, with parental consent. So to this day, literally to this day, there is a picture of me when I was 12 years old holding up that business plan. And I was the first. We pioneered their business loan program. So every entrepreneur, every young person that goes to the second level of this bank, which is called Young Ameritown, basically a town where kids you come in and it's a mock type of a city where you get to be the mayor, you can be the police chief, you can be the this, that, and the other. Now I'm sure they've got the influencer and all of the new things you can be, the AI engineer and what have you. But you get to do it. But what I love about it is every single one that walks on that second level sees me when I was 12 years old holding up that business plan. I just was that type of a kid. I was just different.
Mm. It's so interesting. So, being that kind of kid, coming out grown with the Bible in a briefcase, what was it about law that drew you, that's where you started, or that's where you thought you wanted to start?
I think it's a few things. One, I saw my stepfather was not involved, but he was entangled with law enforcement just from some of his lifestyle choices, and so I got very early on. I got an exposure to the entire legal process and to what that can look like. And so I think one, there was this overexposure that created an intrigue. But then number two, I think the adversarial process of arguing your point, making your point based on data, making your point based on statutes and case law. So let me tell you how far it goes. So as a kid, there was a program called Teen Court in Aurora, Colorado, just a suburb right off of Denver. And again, true to my nature, I was one of the earliest in that program. And so we literally pioneered one of the nation's first juvenile diversion type programs, and it was teen court. So the whole goal was you weren't arguing before the judge for the and a jury of their peers. You weren't arguing for guilt or innocence. You were arguing for what was the sentence going to be. So
Mm.
is how community service hours, how many times were they going to have to come back and serve on a jury for their peers. And so I literally became one of the lead attorneys for that. And it was Wednesday nights. And listen, I was loyal to it. I loved it. And I would get really fired up about the cases. Like as I'm thinking about this, I can remember as a kid, I would get fired up because if I was on the prosecuting side or the defense side, you go back and forth. I mean, I really took what I did serious. I was preparing my case notes in advance, meeting with the, it was just the whole thing. So I saw the ability to impact people's lives on a
Mm.
very granular level. And even to this day, the Colorado Attorney General, he'll say, Dr. Foreman, you should go back to law school and be an attorney. And I remind him that I have zero desire to go back to school to do anything. Not right now, not right now.
Well, it's so interesting. It sounds like you had a whole career from 12 through
Yeah,
high school
yeah.
in the legal profession. So, but you're not an attorney. So,
No.
why the shift? What happened?
I think a great question. For me, I've always wanted to live a purpose-filled life where I saw that what I was doing was impacting lives in a very meaningful way and a divinely purposeful life. And so for me, it was both a sense of divine purpose and however people want to define that for them. There's this sense that I'm here for something greater than just paying bills, having babies, going on a vacation here and there, and leaving the earth. There's got to be more to life than that. And I think that's the thing that when you begin to pour, there's something about all of us that we're built to pour. And when we're pouring, when we're doing that thing, there's a sense of fulfillment that comes that's more meaningful than a check, that's more meaningful than, compensation. And of course, those things are very important. But there are many people who choose to do things. I mean, look at teachers. They can't be doing that because they think that this is I'm going to make it million dollar earner. I mean, they know that going into it,
Yeah.
there's something in them that is fulfilled when they do that. They're like a fish in water. I think for me, the change was that I recognized I had the ability to do all of the different things that I wanted to do from the seat that I would sit in. And for me, that involved planning churches and leadership networks and business and all of those things. So I get to do everything that I wanted to do just from a very different seat. And it's really interesting because even in dating, for example, I sometimes have been told, you're approaching this like an attorney. Like maybe there's a disagreement or something. You're approaching this like an attorney. I said, well, we need data-driven, fact-based arguments. We cannot get into emotional tips, like that type of thing. So, it's just one of those things that I got to do. I think I've been blessed in the sense that I get to do all of the things that I wanted to do, just in a different way, if that makes sense.
Does. And as I'm listening to you, it sounds to me like you have a kind of clarity.
Mhm.
Um, and that kind of clarity allows you to be creative, has allowed you to be creative and see
Mhm.
what it is that I want to do, and therefore all these different ways in which I can bring that about.
Yes, absolutely. And I think clarity is one of those things that comes as you navigate through places and spaces in life that you don't necessarily intend to be.
Mm.
And sometimes life will hit you and life will life. And you'll say, how did I get here? And what I learned to do is instead of why me, which is the question that most people ask, I began to lean into it and say, why not me? What is there in this that I need? What is there in this that's going to help take me to what's next in life? What is there in this that is beneficial to me? We have a lot of people who are conspiracy theorists in the world, right? And there's differing degrees of that. I'm a conspiracy theorist, but to this extent, I have the opposite of what paranoia is. I have pronoia. Pronoia is literally the belief that all things are working together for your good. So while paranoia, there's a conspiracy against you, pronoia says everybody and everything are working together to benefit me. So that has driven a lot of how what many people might take. I got a sack of lemons. You know the old adage. I got a sack of lemons. Oh, life is just a lemon. Well, for me, I was like, no, these lemons were a gift because I'm going to get some sugar and some water and a sign and an app and a website. And we're about to start, a lemonade business that's going to do really well and employ a lot of people. That's just been my approach to life. Not always. I certainly have human moments, but at the end of the day, once you navigate through the mess, I get to the message.
really interesting approach. I really appreciate it. You know, it doesn't sound quite like optimism, but it's a form of optimism, right? This
Sure,
idea that
sure.
everything is working for your good, and you can't quite see it, but you've got a shirt on that says unbothered, right? And
Unbothered,
so,
right, right.
right, I
That's how I
love
live. I
that.
put it on just, I told you, I wore it just for this interview. I had a different shirt on because I think that approach is how we have to approach life, how we have to approach conflict, how we have to approach everything is that things are going to happen. Life is a contact sport. Business is a contact sport. If you're an executive, if you're a manager, it's a contact sport. And most people play it to avoid the contact,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
avoid the conflict, to
Yeah.
avoid the challenge. But the reality is, an avoidance doesn't make it go away, number one. And number two, the way I think that I've navigated through it is why I put this shirt on. Is this is a shirt that was given to me, believe it or not. This is probably like 15 years old. This is my favorite travel shirt, but the message is what resonates unbothered. Things are going to happen, but I have to remain unbothered. Things are going to frustrate me, but I have to remain unbothered. The conflict is going to rise, but I have to remain unbothered.
I love that there's so much that's going on right now that we could talk about, but the idea of unbothered, I love it because it's a choice. A
Yep.
lot of times when things happen to us, we think, well, of course I'm going to be annoyed, or of course I'd be bothered. Anybody would be bothered. And we don't stop to think, well, that is a choice that I'm making. I'm deciding to let this impact me in maybe a negative way, or I'm deciding to think that this is a problem
Right.
in again in a negative way instead of seeing it as an opportunity,
Yes.
seeing it as a gift, that
Right.
suffering can be a gift. We don't wish it on people, we don't
Right.
seek it out, right? But
Right.
when it comes to us, and it comes to all of us, we're human
All of us.
persons, all of us suffer and we all experience joy. This is the human condition.
Yes.
But this idea of the choice of being unbothered. So I want you to talk a little bit more about that in the context of conflict.
Yep.
And also with this criticism I see in the back of my mind of some people, and I think when they hear me talk, they hear a sort of toxic positivity, which I'm
Mhm.
absolutely not,
Mhm.
right? We
Mhm.
don't want that.
Mhm.
We don't want pretending.
Right.
Um, we want real joy. We want
Right.
real satisfaction in working through problems, which is
Right.
difficult. So
Right.
can you talk about that?
You know what? I heard it articulated this way, and I said the first time I heard it, I would give them credit. Now I'll take credit because I'll augment it enough. But the saying is this: is pick your heart, choose your heart.
Mhm.
Conflict is hard. Avoiding conflict is hard. Choose your heart. And I think, to your point, sometimes people can see it as, oh, you're just not living in reality. You're just not being realistic. No, I'm living very much on the reality, but that reality doesn't have to determine how I feel.
Mhm.
Feelings aren't facts. And I think for most people, conflict becomes so negative and becomes such a, oh, I don't want to do it because you've pre-decided that this is a negative thing. This is a bad thing. We can't have a discussion. We can't have different viewpoints. I think a lot of that is what's happening in the world today. We can have different viewpoints without there being, we have to be enemies. Conflict doesn't mean the creation of enemies. Conflict, in fact, I believe it this way, conflict is a byproduct of growth. Where there's growth, there's going to be conflict. Now, what we have to do is decide to grow together or grow apart or grow blank, whatever the blank might be there, if there's a third option. And so it is a choice. And I think for many people that thought that conflict. I have been known, and that's one of the reasons I brought up even in dating, because for so many people, you can learn how they live based on how they date and how they're married. The way they handle conflict with the people closest to them is really often the greatest revealer of how they're going to handle conflict across the board. And so it is that choice that I'm just not going to be bothered by it. Like, let's address the issue. I don't have to attack the individual.
Right.
Let's deal with the problem. I don't have to attack the person. And that's where I think it gets really blurry and really muddy, and why so many people avoid it, because it becomes something that says, you know what, this is not I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. Well, just okay, but that's a choice. I
Mhm.
can be unbothered. I can be, and this is another thing that can frustrate a lot of people. I can be calm and we can still be in conflict. I don't have to
Mhm.
get upset and raise my voice and all of that for whatever it is. So again, I think you articulated it well. It's a choice, and it's the choice to say, you're not going to avoid conflict. You
Mhm.
can only avoid it for so long. You're not going to get rid of conflict. The only way to get rid of conflict is to stop growing.
Mhm. Absolutely. And this idea of, right, when we get frustrated and angry, the question of what do we do with those emotions? Emotions are good
Mhm.
information. It's
Mhm.
telling us something very important. But how are we going to act? Are we going to act in a way that is in line with our values? Are we going to act in accord with how we're just like having this visceral response?
Right.
And so emotions can come alongside, and I can have a lot of feelings, the good or the
Mhm.
bad, whatever, however you might
Mhm.
think about feelings.
Mhm.
But then the
Mhm.
question is, how am I going to move forward in this relationship? How am I going
Right.
to move forward in this interaction? It is
Yes.
not, as you said, already preset
Nope.
as if this circumstance necessitates this response.
Yep. Absolutely. So true. And I love what you said about moving forward, because I think the issue for many people is that conflict becomes the perfect opportunity to automatically cancel.
Mm,
Meaning, the moment there is conflict, we need to cancel this. Whether it's, we need to fire this person, we need to get out of this relationship, or whatever the context is.
mm,
And I don't believe that. I don't believe that conflict automatically means cancel. The reality is again, it's a byproduct of growth. How do we move forward? And if forward movement and forward progress is your objective, it
mm,
makes it very easy to be unbothered because I've decided we're not going to stay stuck here. So what do we need to do to fix this so we can move forward? I think about something really simple. I remember years ago we were having conflict with a particular project that we were working on for one of my organizations. And in that, I said, okay, like at the end of the day, we can't stay stuck here. So what are we going to do next? What's going to be the forward moving option? I think a lot of people have learned to go in circles in
mm,
life and don't even know they're going in circles. It just
mm.
becomes a natural thing. We're just going round and around and we go, round and around and around we go. It's like a song they make it into
Right.
of life because the decision hasn't been let's move forward. So I can be objective because the goal is forward movement. And here's something that's probably an unpopular opinion. Sometimes you can be right or you can get results. Pick which
Mm,
one you want.
mhm. Right.
Because sometimes the end of the conflict will be we still don't see it the same way, but this
Right.
is how we're moving forward. We
Yeah.
still aren't going to, we still are on two different planets about how we feel or think about it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that there's not a path forward from this that's mutually beneficial.
That's such a wonderful point because a lot of times when we're in conflict, we think we're in an argument and that's a
Mhm.
win-lose. I'm going to win, you're going to lose, right? I'm in
Yes.
it to win it.
Yep.
And then we are thinking about it in the wrong sort of way, right? So if I think about conflict as I've got the facts and you don't, you're
Mhm.
mistaken. So my goal here is to get you to see that you're wrong and I'm right.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, what if they don't see it? What if they don't
Yep.
change? How,
Yep.
and if that's your goal, then you're going to lose. But if your goal
Yep.
is, how am I going to work with this person? Even if they have different values, even if they see the world differently, how are we going to come together as this community? How are we going to solve this problem? If that's it, then I can live and let live. I can
Yes.
be unbothered. I can
Yes.
look towards the future instead of ruminating about this tape of, I'm right and I've been wronged. I'm right and I've been wrong. Okay, yes, you're right. You've been wronged. Now, do you just want to stay in that narrative, spinning,
Right.
or do
Right.
you want to do something more fruitful, something forward looking?
Yep, and that's how you said that is so perfectly articulated because it goes back to that saying I said you can be right or you can get results. You need to pick which
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
And sometimes part of conflict resolution is simply acknowledging that okay, they don't get it, they don't see it, and that's okay.
Mm,
But we can still move forward. Now, granted, there's some
mhm,
items that some issues that I think may need resolution. But a lot of the stuff, to your point, that we go back and forth about, and that we extend a lot of energy, and that we are, all of that it's a complete and total issue because it's not very beneficial. Because at the end of the day, okay, so you're right. So what do you get for that?
right.
What's the reward for that versus
Right.
results? Yep.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of the old saying, he who dies with the most toys wins. Like,
Mm,
you get it. You can sit in your righteousness or your self-righteousness, and you might actually be right. But what is the prize? What have
right.
you sacrificed? Have you sacrificed relationship? Have you sacrificed community? Have you sacrificed love? What are the goods that you haven't gotten because you have been focused on this one thing? I am right and
Mhm,
you are wrong.
mhm.
And you're not being creative and you're not trying to partner with a real dialogue. A dialogue recognizes it's me and you,
Right.
not just me versus you. So how do
Correct.
we
Oh, yes.
move right in this forward looking? And it doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge real harm and
Hmm.
pain and
Hmm.
that people do this, but it also acknowledges that people have different views and people
Yep.
make mistakes and we're human persons.
Yes.
And even with all of that, we can still do something better, do something different.
Yes. I mean, you said it so well. Only thing I could add to that is yes. Right? Because you articulated it so well. And again, I can speak to that from experience of being on the side of, well, I'm right. Okay, great. But we're going to move forward because at the end of the day, what's the goal, right?
Hmm.
Or results. And sometimes you can have both, but there's an acknowledgement that you're right. Sometimes you just have to be right to you.
Hmm.
You just have to know, okay, well, I know I'm right, and keep it moving. And then sometimes you really have to ask yourself the question, what's the ultimate goal? Because I think for many
Hmm.
people, the fight becomes the goal within itself. And I say the
Mm,
fight in the sense of it's an adversarial approach. And I love how you
yeah,
said it. It's me versus you versus me and you. And so at the end of the day, because it's such that, then that becomes the goal. The goal becomes to win the fight, to win the
hmm,
argument. But what did you win?
yeah,
Because at the
absolutely.
end of the day, if the goal is forward movement, then you've just obfuscated that goal, and you're not gonna have that result.
Yeah. So when you think about your younger self, like conflict is
Mhm,
normal and expected. We're
mhm,
going to have it.
mhm,
So your younger self, when you're out in
mhm.
the workforce, how did you deal with conflict? And is it different now how you deal with conflict? Has there been any change?
Great question. So the reason I can speak to that and articulate it is because I was the I'm right. And I was the fight was the goal.
Hmm.
Winning the fight or the whatever was the goal. As time progressed, I realized that okay, that can't be the goal. The goal has to be results. So sometimes the acknowledgement just simply has to be that you're not going to see it from the perspective from which I see it. I'm not going to see it from the perspective of which you see it. And so the goal has to be resolution. And so I think that I've watched that happen in me
Hmm.
from a variety of things, from business to leadership to management. I like to be very, for example, with people who work for me, I like to be very black and white, very clear, step one, step two, step three, step four. And sometimes I would get so frustrated. So now which of these that's clearly laid out did you not understand? And recognizing that at the end of the day, to your point, humans are humans, myself included, and there's going to be challenges. There's going to be things that happen. And again, it's recognized like a football game. If you get hit, you don't go in the locker room. I'm just, what's wrong? I don't know what's going on with this game. There's such a problem. I don't know what's going on. These people are crazy. This world is crazy. No, that's the game. And I think if you go into it viewing it that way, for me, it certainly shifted how I manage and handle conflict. So now I literally often, especially if I'm dealing with somebody that's a bit more emotionally charged, I normally step back and say, okay, but what we have to do is let's deal with the issue. And let's create some ground rules on how we're going to address the conflict, right? And then I normally will start with the what I just said. The goal here is to resolve the issue, not to attack me or me attack you or whatever it might be. So let's just deal with the issue. So let's agree to the following things. That's normally the first. Second is no personal insults or attacks because that's once you do that, you might as well just burn the whole thing down because nobody's listening because everybody's now responding to it's a jab for a jab, it's an uppercut for an uppercut, it's a body slam for a body slam. So once we do that, it's over. It's not going to be beneficial. Thirdly, let's listen to learn and not listen to respond. Because
Hmm.
most people, while somebody else is talking, they're just preparing their responses.
Hmm.
And so this is literally what I have learned through the years, depending on the scenario, I will take out a notebook and I will write down what's going on. And for some, it's like this is overkill. Yeah, but you know what? When you build things as big as I've have been privileged to build and teams and organizations and whatever it might be, you realize that if you are not strategic about, and I love this show title you have, I told you that before we got, if you are not managing the conflict is managing you.
Hmm.
So I literally will often write down the things that are there, be very specific, I'm listening, and I'm actively listening to what's being said. And then, okay, now let's move forward. But I've watched that evolution because before, that is not the way that it would go. It was, they say one thing, wait a minute, that's not true. Da, 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 da. They said the thing, wait a minute, that's not true either. And then you get into all of this. And then before you know it, all you've had is an emotional experience that you can't evolve from.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I wondered when you were talking about your younger self and the lawyer in you, right? And this desire for justice, for
Mhm.
facts, for,
Yep.
the reasonable way forward.
Right.
I'm a philosopher. I taught philosophy for over 20 years, and that is in me as well. Like I
Mhm.
can see the argument, I can see the path, I can see what's going on.
Right.
But the question is always, what is your goal, right? What is your mission? What are you trying to achieve? And
Right.
I hope all of our mission, whether we're in profit, nonprofit, at home, in the community, is to leave people better than we found them, to
Mhm.
love ourselves and our neighbor. If
Mhm.
that's our ultimate goal, then we can ask, why am I burning it down on burning the relationship down on this thing?
So again, you slam dunk once again. You articulated it so well. Is should we tear this up for this?
Hmm.
Should we burn this bridge for this?
Hmm.
You look at even the state of America, and I think this will go a little bit deeper, but I think part of what has contributed to that is that social media has been such a great, amazing blessing and tool and resource. The flip side is it's made people handle conflict with a block, right? I don't have to talk to you anymore. I don't have to
Hmm.
deal with you anymore. I don't need to speak to you anymore. And you've seen people who have been friends for years over
Hmm.
one thing. Maybe it's something political, maybe it's something whatever. For one thing, it is boop, you're blocked, you're deleted, you are no longer in my life. I no longer have to deal with you. Few outcomes come out of that. Number one is you never learn how to deal with conflict because you
Hmm.
don't have to.
Right.
I can just disappear you. You're disappeared. As far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned, you don't exist because you're not in my feed anymore. You're not in my life anymore. I blocked you from my phone. I don't have to deal with you. Number two is that you can think that that is conflict resolution. You know
Right.
what? This is getting too heated. I'm done with the conversation. You know what? I don't like what you said. I'm done with the conversation. Well, that's not conflict resolution, not
Right.
conflict management. And I think that's the state of mind, which is why I love what you're doing, as so many people have, is that that's conflict. No, we resolved it. I don't talk to her anymore. Wait a minute, but that's not resolution.
Right.
Unless that was resolution, but what you and I both know, and what everybody listening and watching knows, most times that wasn't really resolved. What it
Right.
was is it was canceled. And again, one of my big saying is conflict does not necessarily mean cancellation.
Hmm.
Conflict rather, is an opportunity to construct something much better.
Oh, I love that. Conflict really is that opportunity because, we can have conflict just by ourselves, right? We don't need other people, right? That sort of battle within ourselves. But if we want to grow, if we want something better in our teams, our services, whatever we're doing, then it takes that you and me together. And we should expect to have different points of view. We should
Yes.
expect this. And that if we can disagree well together, that's the goal. We want to disagree well. If there's no disagreement, that's a problem. That means we're all thinking in the same way and
Right.
something is wrong. We're not hiring well or
Right.
everybody's afraid to speak up, right? So
Right.
this is a problem. But we should expect to disagree well, where, as you've said many times, that the problem is the problem, not the person. But we're focusing on the right thing. You can
Mhm.
disagree enthusiastically,
Mhm.
respectfully, right?
Oh, so true.
And when we do those things, we develop resilience, we
Mhm.
develop better relationships, stronger relationships, and we can deconstruct this artificial world of adversary versus friend, right? So the
Mhm.
adversary is someone who thinks differently than I do, who has different, this othering, And so if we really want community, then that means it comes with all of its shades and all of its difficulties, which
Yes.
is we just don't, we got to figure it out. And as you said, just turn it off, which is bad for us and bad for them and the
Oh, so,
community.
so much so. And I think really to your point, then you really you lose the ability to have community. So if you don't have community,
Mm.
then what do you have? Then you're confined.
Yeah.
A lot of times we live in these very homogeneous groups. Everybody's the same. Everybody thinks the same, walks the same, talks the same, wears the same clothes, da, 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 da. And think, but this is community. This is, well, no, really, that's not community. We can go deeper there, but I won't. That's something else. That's a confine. That's a prison,
Mm,
because being exposed to the diversity and the tapestry that is in other people. I'm a better leader because I've been exposed to people who do not think like me. And
mhm,
I intentionally, this is something I intentionally do. I intentionally listen to things and listen to people who are totally polar opposite, different than how I think, than how I move, than how I walk, than how I talk. And for many people, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. Well, again, if you're not willing to engage conflict, then you can't construct. So if you're not in the business of construction, you're in the business of demolition.
mm,
You're tearing things down, even if it's
mm,
you.
mm,
And I think for people who are constantly avoiding conflict, constantly having bad conflict. I mean, look at the marital statistics pre-COVID. Now, again, I haven't seen numbers post-COVID, so who knows what those are. But pre-COVID, 50% of first marriages divorce, 67% of second marriages divorce, 73% of third marriages divorce. You think it get better, that's, but it doesn't. And
mhm,
here's why. People just, in my belief, one of the reasons, several reasons, but one of the reasons is because people simply lose, you said it, their resilience to resolve conflict. So you know what? I do not like the way you cooked today. And you know what? This is just, you know what? My last wife did it like this. My last husband did it like this. You know what? This is just not going to work. Because how did the number get worse? And substantially worse? I believe it's because everybody, we live in a culture where, again, and social media, I believe, has fueled that. But this is as ancient as, as ancient as life. That conflict is not properly managed, and I've said it once, I'll say it again. And if you're not managing it, it's managing you. And for many people, they've torn apart relationships, torn apart businesses, ruined opportunities because the moment it was time to engage in conflict, it became, I don't want to do it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. You're my enemy. You're against me,
mm.
and that's not the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, this idea of, what are we going to get if we manage conflict versus avoid conflict? So,
Mhm,
imagine your life and your goal is to avoid conflict.
mhm,
What do you think you're going to get? What kind of opportunities? How are you
mhm,
going to learn? How are you going to build partnerships? How are you going to be about in the world if your goal is to be unbothered in the sense of this timid sense, right? In
yes.
this sense of the sheltered of, I don't want anybody to make me feel any pain. Well, we're not going to be able to escape pain. The pain is a part of being in the world. So it's gonna come to you. So even if you try to avoid it,
Mhm,
then what do you get? Being alone?
mhm.
Congratulations, right? That's got
Right.
its own pain.
Right. Absolutely. And it goes back to the analogy I gave earlier. It's contact sport. And I believe this, if you're not taking hits, you're not playing it well. That really helped me because, in whatever seat I sit in, I generally am focused on the mission, focused on moving forward. And it just is what it is. And I remember starting to take shots, just from all different sides. And I said, where is this shot coming from? And then I coined this phrase: if you're going to call the shots, you have to be willing to take the shots. And part of that deals with the conflict that comes from people, and the conflict that comes in life, the hits you take in life. And again, if you don't learn how to take those hits well, and again, I'll go back to the word you use, to develop that resilience, to develop the ability to have constructive conversations, then what's going to happen is you're going to constantly be in the circle. One of the sayings I love is many people have been where they're going. Now, I don't think the people that are watching and listening to you are that type of person because they're listening to something that is directly, contradicting and giving life-giving information to not be that way. But many people have been where they're going because they've never really learned. People talk about, you know, just move on. Well, there's a difference between going through something and growing through something.
Mm.
And most people just move on and just move on. And then, 5 relationships later, what's the common denominator here? Maybe it's not that all 5 of these people have been bad. And if they are, you picked them. So let's dig into that, right? There's so many layers and levels. Maybe it's not every boss you've had. Really, the last 7 bosses have been bad? Yeah, maybe. But, or is it that you just didn't learn how to address conflict? There's going to be conflict. There's going to be friction in that conflict. But again, that can be resolved. I mean, just think about it. Train tracks move and trains move on the tracks because of friction. You look at a plane flying, a plane, it is the lift, it's the air pushing against it that actually keeps that thing in the air. So I think the reality is again, I'll keep going back to it. You either grow through it or go through it. And I choose, part of being unbothered, to grow through it.
I really like that because what I see in a lot of organizations is, let's suppose there's been some real big conflicts that have not been managed. They've been going on for a very long
Mhm,
time.
mhm,
And then finally, of administration have said, we've had enough, we're doing something
mhm,
new. And
mhm,
so just we're moving on.
mhm.
And the past doesn't get addressed, and people are just expected to suck it up and move forward. And that's just not how humans work, right? We need our real issues addressed to help us grow, right? So this process of growing,
Mhm,
um, you don't just get it because time has passed, as you have
mhm,
said, right? We can
mhm.
learn the same lessons over and over and over. It means we're not learning them, right?
Right.
So so what advice do you have for not just going through something, going through the pain, but growing and learning and having it be efficacious for you?
Mhm. Oh, love it. One, approach life as a student. I think most people approach life as an expert because, well, I have this degree, I have this education, I have this background, I know this, I've been here, I do this. And so it can begin to improperly reinforce the belief that you're always right.
Mhm.
And it can improperly reinforce the belief that you know everything that there is to know about anything related to that area or that subject.
Mhm.
And so I chose to live life as a student. Every day, that's how I approach life. If someone was to ask me what I do, I would say I'm a student of life. And most people come to me because, quote unquote, I'm an expert in this and this and that and that. And I will always say, well, I've learned a lot, but I'm still learning every single day. I'm still growing every single day. If you're going to grow through something, your approach has to be a student. Experts, if what they believe is challenged, they will do everything possible to find information to reinforce their expert opinion because if it goes wrong, it shatters their expert status.
Mhm.
A student is not that way. A student knows I'm going to get some questions wrong. A
Mhm.
student knows I'm here to learn. The very word student, I'm here to learn. I am not here to just push what I believe I know. I am here to learn. That is the best way to grow through anything because now it makes you inquisitive. I can
Mhm.
ask questions and say, no, why did I get so mad about that?
Right.
Now, why did I let that bother me?
Right.
Why did I let that get under my skin? Versus, I can't believe I was spoken to that way. I
Yeah.
can't believe this person did that to me. And so now you walk around, you got a chip on your shoulder, you're mad at everybody. You can, cast different people into different groups based on one experience with one person. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Now you put everybody in this group based on this one experience with this one person. That's not healthy. So, number one, be a student. Number two, I would say this in being a student, approach things from the perspective that I might be wrong. Most of us go into everything presuming I'm right. Oh, I know I'm right. I know I'm right. And what happens is then to enforce our right, we use might. So now I get you raise your voice because I'm right. Now, to your point, you in a corporate room, you come in and you know what? Yep, these numbers are down and they're down because we got lazy workers. That's what it is, or whatever it might be. We got people who are not doing what they're supposed to do. This is the problem. And you come in and you make a change, not realizing that, well, maybe it's a systems issue. Maybe it's something else. I have to approach it being a student as I might be wrong. And this invites this inquisition and invites this opportunity to now grow through something because then you can say, I can't tell you the number of times I've said something and I knew exactly what I meant. But to the person who heard it, they heard something totally different. And once we dig past all of the things that can come with a disagreement, a misunderstanding, it's I thought you meant that. No, I didn't mean that. I thought you meant that. No, I didn't mean that. And
Mhm.
it's like, I'm sure you've seen that meme on social media where they're standing looking at a 9 or a 6, depending on your perspective. And one
Right.
guy points down and says, this is a 9, this is a 9. The other guy says, this is a 6, this is a 6. But both of them are right from their
Yeah.
perspectives.
Mhm. I love that so much, the student metaphor, because I think the bread and butter of conflict management is curiosity. Curiosity
Mhm.
about myself first. Why am I having this experience? What is it that I want? What is it that I see? What do they see? Like all these curious questions. But if we are a student, then we do expect that there's something that we probably don't know or that we could be wrong, right? And
Yes.
I've got a narrative about why you're doing what you're doing, but that enough humility to realize, well, maybe that's not the whole story, and maybe it is, but how am I going to find out through the
Yep.
process of dialogue and being that student? I love that.
Yeah, you know what you just said though, and this is one of the things that I think is really, really important, and that is having the humility. I think for some, pride is one of the biggest reasons that conflict isn't managed well. It's because
Mhm.
to acknowledge that I'm a student for some is to say I am unaccomplished. And that's not the same thing, right?
Right, not
Because
at
how many
all.
people view it. To acknowledge, and again, to acknowledge that I might be wrong is to suggest that I'm always wrong and I always make mistakes and I'm never right.
Mhm.
So then everything becomes I have to prove that I am right. I have to prove that I am accomplished. And really, it's all pride. And, at the end of the day, you got to ask the guy at the end of his life, what did pride get you? A
Mhm.
nicer tombstone? Because at the end of the day, for us all, regardless of what your beliefs might be, on this side of life, whatever you believe on this side of life, it all ends the same way. What startling
Mhm.
statistic: 1 out of 1 people is going to die.
Right. That's
One
all
out
of
of one
us.
people is going to not live forever, right? 1 out of 1, right? I mean, it's 100% chance that you are not going to be on this planet forever. So, what did you get by walking in pride? And the reality is nothing. And I think
Yeah.
when you listen to many people when they are in, some might refer to it as their deathbed or the last stage of their life. For many, there's often this reflection, and I see it in a lot of what I do. There's this reflection that they misspent many of their days fighting to be right and
Mm.
letting pride dictate their actions. And if they could go back and do anything, I never hear anybody say, you know what, I would go back and tell that woman she was so wrong and did that. You know what, I would go back and tell, what I hear from many people when they're at that stage, and is that if they could go back and do anything, they'd say, you know what, I would have not handled it that way. I would have not changed it that way. And I know that's a bit more of a broader view because most people don't live with the realization that you won't live forever. But
Mhm.
I think adding that, if I was to throw a third thing on there, adding that on there to say, in the grand scheme of things, if
Mhm.
if I was to get to the end of my days, would this have even mattered the way I'm making it matter?
Mhm.
Would this even be that big of a deal the way I'm making it a big of a deal? Or have I exerted a lot of energy to, as you said before, to tear down and tear up and burn down something that frankly just doesn't really matter?
Yeah. I always think it's good to right size things. And I say there are two things that we know for sure. One is death and not taxes, because you can evade it, don't do it, but death and
True.
conflict, right? We know
Yes.
we're going to have conflict and we know we're going to die. And
Mhm.
any way that you can right size it, and if you've been holding on to something, we've already spent so much energy and money and time, but it's not like you're going to get any of that back. You're just going to lose more. You're going to lose
Mhm.
more if you don't let
Mhm.
go of it
Yep.
and try something else. So this year on Conflict Manage, we are also looking at generational differences at work.
Ooh.
So what do you see as maybe the main contributor, or what contributes to when you have a multi-generational workforce disconnect that, and what advice do you have?
I think one, I think the reality is there are lots of disconnects, multi-generational, you put multi in front of anything, you're gonna have multiples. And so I think that's the reality. What I've noticed building organizations that do have multiple generations, right? At one point, for one of my largest organizations, it was completely all staffers were completely like the whole thing was millennial ran.
Mhm.
And so that became a very thing that was given a lot of notoriety by many. Because oh my God, he's building this thing, and he's got like all of these people are like at that time they were all like under 30, somewhere between 22 and 30, and so I noticed in viewing that, that then when you begin to work in different generations, and when you begin to bring together different groups of people with different backgrounds, that yes, there's going to be conflict. I think number one, there's a conflict because everybody basically, it's like going to the airport. Everybody brought their baggage to the airport. And so everybody's got their bag, or you kids don't do nothing. And then you got the kids, air quotes, y'all, that's antiquated, that's crazy, that's archaic. Nobody's going to do it like that. And so everybody brought their baggage to the airport. I think what great leaders do is learn how to sort the baggage.
Mm.
And when you sort the baggage, we can get the baggage to the right plane. So where does this need to go? Because guess what? There's some value in all of those different backgrounds. So let's sort the baggage and get this on the right plane so that we make sure that this thing takes off and is successful. Because we can't spend our time going through each other's baggage, right? We can't spend our time. I'm never going to see it the way some other people see it. I'm just never going to see it that way because that's not my experience, and vice versa. But let's sort this baggage and let's see how do we get it to the right plane so that everybody's able to take off and make it to their destination, whatever that might be from a corporate sense. Well, if you view it that way in the workplace, if you view it that way in a corporate structure, the goal becomes, all right, we want our organization to do well. We all should want that because if the organization does well, generally speaking, you're going to do well. And
Right.
if you do well, the organization, like there should be this symbiosis. I don't know there's nuance to that, but there should be this symbiosis. And so that being understood, how do we take these bags and get them to the right place? There, you know what? That's a great piece of baggage. We need that mentality over here in this area.
Mhm.
You know what? That's a great way to do it. Sometimes, particularly maybe an older generation will look at a younger generation and say they take a lot of shortcuts. Well, where does your company need to take some shortcuts?
Mhm.
If often, I think it was, who was it? Was it Steve Jobs or some person's bio? I forget. Maybe it's Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, one of those tech types. And they said when they wanted to figure out how to get something done efficiently, they would give it to a lazy person because they said a lazy person find the quickest and easiest way to get it done. And when I first heard that, I immediately, was in conflict with it. I said, no, you can't give good things to lazy people. They're lazy. And then I said, wait a minute. Here it is growing. Here it is student. It makes
Right.
perfect sense because they're going to find the quickest, easiest way so they can go back to being lazy. They're going to find the quickest and easiest way to do it. And sometimes we have these convoluted systems
Mhm.
that you could cut 50 steps out.
Yeah.
And I see this happen in all of my businesses, all of my organizations. Like we have all of these systems, all of these steps, and we could cut that out, cut that out, cut that. You can cut all these things out. And sometimes it requires a different generation to see
Yeah.
it that way.
Mhm.
When it comes to marketing, I was a big believer in traditional TV. And so, I've been on traditional TV for years. I did the programs, the 2830 and all of that. And then I remember somebody in one of our organizations saying, well, sir, we should be doing YouTube. And this was several years ago. And I said, YouTube? I said, no, that's regular content, just a bunch of people over there. There's nothing special. Like, I came from the school of thought, like, and I'm not super old. I just came to the thought of, you need to have a white label product that's branded to you and all of that. And I hated the concept of YouTube. YouTube today, it is our biggest way, one of
Mhm.
our biggest ways to reach and connect with people when 10 years ago I was completely opposed to the concept. You
Yeah.
could YouTube, get out of here. I don't know what's doing YouTube. Like, that's cheapening what we're doing. That's ridiculous. And so again, but what do we do as a leader? I have to step back and say, let's take everybody's bags and listen, that's your baggage, so you get to keep it, but let's see how we get these bags to the right places in our organization so our organization can take off. And let's not avoid it, let's lean into it.
Mhm.
Let's lean into some of these things that most people just try to avoid. And I understand perhaps there's some legal and compliance things that you have to be mindful of. But I say to everybody, lean into it. And as a leader, get those bags to the right plane and don't be afraid of addressing some of those things because some of your greatest innovations are going to
Mhm.
come from the conflict in generations. I like that. Some of your greatest innovations are going to come from the conflict in generations.
I love that. Gosh, I love that thinking about, all showing up to the airport with our different baggage or different luggage. And I'm not going to pack for you and you're not going to pack for me, but what we both brought is valuable. And how do we put those
Yes.
things together? And I
Yes.
also love it because whoever shows up on the plane is on the plane, right? So many
Yes.
times in a work environment, we don't want that person. And so, like, when we fight against reality and we don't accept that this
Mhm.
is what is. So, this is what is. What am I going to do now? I'm a
Yes.
part of this organization. I don't like the way they are. Oh, well.
Right.
I can decide to like that. I can decide again for that to bother me or not.
Unbothered. There it goes.
Well, I could talk to you all day long, but I'm going to end with the
Likewise.
last question.
Sure.
When you look into the future of work, what do you
Mhm.
think needs to happen so not only will all people be treated with dignity and respect, but that people will be encouraged to thrive and flourish?
Good question. I think really one, the name of your show is to manage conflict well. Number two, I think to make sure that all people are treated with dignity and respect is to realize that every human, if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, every human basically wants the same things.
Mhm,
We basically all want that. We're basically all trying to get to the same things in life. And so recognize I have more in common with you
mhm,
than I do different than you. In fact, our differences are so negligible. The only reason we know them is because we've been taught to focus on them.
mhm,
And this doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It just means that I love your point of this is reality, deal with it. It's so good. And I think we say the third thing when you say how are people going to be treated with dignity and respect, don't demonize those differences.
mhm,
Those differences don't have to be demonized and denigrated and seen as bad things. They can be seen as great things. Some of my best innovations have came from people, as I just mentioned. That's one, but I can give you tons that were totally different. I'm like, why would I even think about it like that? But when I learned to approach it differently, I could step back and say, you know what? Why would I not think about it like that? That is a great idea.
mhm,
And to every leader, it doesn't make you less of a leader to listen. It doesn't make you less of a leader to be open to learning from those that you lead. In fact, I think those are the best leaders
mhm,
because those are the people who you will get people to be loyal in ways that others will never get because the people say, you know what, he may not do what I suggested, but I know that he heard my suggestion. We may
Absolutely.
not go, he may not fly back to the plane analogy. We may not fly this plane that way. But you know what? I want to go over the open ocean and he wants to keep it next to the coast. We may not flow it that way, but I know that I was heard.
Mhm.
And for many, that's all they want. It's just to
Yeah,
be heard because in areas of their life, they are not heard.
yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for such a wonderful conversation, Dr. Foreman. I just feel
Thank
like I really
you.
could talk to you all afternoon, and I
Likewise.
so appreciate the work that you are doing and how you are talking into people's lives individually and really caring for them and the ultimate goal, right, of where we're going and where we're going next.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me. Again, I said it to you at the top. I'll say it again. Thank you for creating these conversations because I believe conversations are catalysts for transformation. Everything that's going to change starts with a conversation. And here again, being a student, I'm walking away from this interview not having just shared, but I'm walking away having grown. And again, that's how I live. To me, everything, I'm learning something. So you've given me, if you heard me typing over here, that was me typing notes because I know this about myself. If I don't type it, I'm not going to, you got to type to teach. So I have to type it to teach it. But thank you for what you do because I think what you're doing is so amazing and so needed, especially right now.
Oh, thank you so much. And I have learned a lot, and I'm going to be taking some of these examples along with me and sharing them with
Yes.
others. So thank you.
Yes,
Well, take
indeed.
care,
You too.
Dr. Foreman. Oh my goodness gracious. I loved our conversation so much. There's a lot of what you've said today that I definitely have learned from. And if you show up to one of the things in which I teach or speak at, you're going to probably be hearing this airport metaphor analogy. I'm going to think more about it, but it's wonderful. And so much of what you've said. So thank you for the work that you're doing to love on people, to help people grow, to help people think about what really matters and then what to do to get there. Conflict Managed is produced by Third Party Workplace Conflict Restoration Services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back, we have new episodes every Tuesday. And if you would like and share wherever you subscribe, if you would like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch this podcast, it's greatly appreciated. My newest book, How to Be My newest book, Winning the Generation Wars at Work, Making Your Age an Asset, is now out and available. And it considers how do we work with those other people, those older people, those younger people, those people in the middle, so that really what Dr. Foreman and I have been talking about, how do we have these healthy work environments where we can work together instead of being stuck in these old, tired narratives? Our music is courtesy of Deaf Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.